Top of the middle of the day to you boys and girls. We're in the shop at the bench for another little narrative session, and today for your viewing pleasure we're gonna do a little pseudo comparison, I guess. This isn't going to be a super in-depth one, but anyway, better throw the disclaimers out right off the bat. This will be a discussion only. There won't be any rock'em sock'em robots going on here. It's going to be just kind of discussion and things that I've noticed about running a 462. This is the C-M, technically with an R associated with it, but that was a homemade deal, versus the 572xp. That saw has been on loan forever, but anyway, disclaimers, kind of continuing the saga. We're going to be kind of long-winded, maybe, possibly, and we're going to be talking about mechanical things. So if you find that interesting and enjoyable, this will be a video suited for you. If you are not that type and you're looking for some action, this is not your video, I guess. So anyway, that's about it for that part of it. Moving right along, I have had the 462 for quite some time, had an opportunity to run it probably about 25 days in total. Some of those days were 10-hour days since I was trying to stay ahead of Sergeants Incorporated while I was using this thing on several different occasions in the last 6 or 8 months, and they gobble up the wood, so there you go. The 572, it's been on extended loan from Mr. Townsend over in England. I'm super gracious and grateful, actually. He was gracious enough to let me have this saw for a really long period of time. We were working on some things. Yeah, so anyway, I guess we'll do a shout out for Mr. Townsend. Thanks, man, for letting me keep your saw and thrash on it. I only burned it up a little bit. Used it for, he said he had 10 or so tanks of gas on it, I think, and he said he thought it was kind of lazy. I kind of agreed when I ran it in stock form. We woke her up a little bit, though. We cyclewized that saw, even though he was really only looking for the Insano SS version, because we were going to compare it to the Psycho SS version, which is about the top of the heap for the 462, at least as far as you can go. There's still another level you could take the 572 up to at this point, but they're relatively equal as far as the work that went into them, even though this one's maxed out pretty much just because of the way the engine is designed. We'll talk about that for a second. 52 millimeter bore in this particular saw, but it's got an uber short stroke. It comes in at 34, so it's the same configuration as the 272 Husqvarna. They had that same engine design, so instantaneous RPMs, but actually seems to do okay pulling a 32. I like it balance-wise with a 30 personally, an Oregon lightweight 30 that I've conjured up in the shop one day. Mostly because the saw is super lightweight, comes in around 13.4 or 5, I don't know, it depends on your scales, and if you're using, I don't know, I weighed it with the full wrap set that I actually manufactured, so probably add a little bit weight, and we got the bigger dogs on this saw than it came with as well, so there's a little bit added weight. It was about 13.4, 13.5 or something. 572, it's actually a little bit heavier. It's about 1.5 pounds heavier. We did conjure up the dogs on that one. I'm not sure in comparison to what it's going to weigh with a stock set. We blew those together in a very short period of time just to do some testing. It wasn't really going to be a long-term deal, but it ended up turning out to be that. They're going to go back to England. Mr. Townsend was requesting to have those show up on that saw when it makes the voyage back across the pond, so we're leaving those on there. And I think I mentioned this before in another video, these are kind of an interesting set of handlebars. We have 562, we have 660, the old style, actually 066 with the longer swoop in it. We have 562, I think, in this one, and then there's a piece in here that my son actually fabbed himself. So kind of got a mix and match. One thing I'll notice or make note of, I guess, is this particular piece of this rod that sticks through is a stop. Works with this hole that you see right here. Like I said, we worked together, me and my son. We got that so it's pretty much right in the center of the hole where it's supposed to be, so I was well pleased. But I'm pretty sure the factory version is going to be a little bit lighter. So the point being, the 572 is a little bit heavier. The cylinder itself is much heavier than what we see in the 462. That's part of the equation just right there. There's a large differential, and I can't remember exactly what those numbers were, but the cylinder itself in the 572 is getting close to 2 pounds. It's like super heavy. It's like 870 or 60 or something 80 grams, whereas the 462 cylinder comes in much lighter. It's only about 1.5 pounds or something like that. Super lightweight versus not so much super lightweight. They're more in line with the 461s weight-wise. We kind of talked about the bore and stroke, so if we look at the 572, we will go down that road. It's 48 millimeter stroke by 49, it is 48 millimeter bore, and it has a 39 millimeter stroke. So they're kind of polar opposites. 5 millimeters more stroke in the 572. That's quite a bit. It's interesting when you're running these saws. The Stihl feels fairly smooth in the way the power comes through the handlebars. Could be the spring mounts on this particular saw might be a little bit not lighter duty, but maybe the springs themselves take up more of the harmonic balance situation, and they diffuse that, and it's not getting actually through the handlebars. Even though we have a full circle crank in the 572, it's really smooth. It's not really a smoothness. It's a feel. It seems like the 572 feels like it pulls harder down low, just from me running it with different lengths of bars. I haven't had a 3-foot bar on the 462. I have had a 3-foot bar on the 572. It seems like it's just got a little more low end. I did another tweak since, I don't know, back in November I think it was, and then we ran these two with a 32 against each other, and they were almost exactly the same. I think the 572 was just a fuzz quicker, but we're talking a fuzz compared to in the summer when the temperature was up around 100, and it seemed like the 572 was a little faster than the 462. At this point, we're probably broken in for the most part. The 572, with the amount of time it has on it, I wouldn't expect it to come around too much more at 10-12 days. The 462, with the number of days on it, it's got to be broken in at this point. I mean, the thing's cut like, I don't even know, 450,000 or something. I tallied it up, I don't know, a while ago, a month ago or whatever. It seemed like thing's got about 450 on it. So it's cut a fair amount of wood. I'm thinking it's pretty much broken in as much as it's going to get. We did do a mod besides the exhaust on the 462. I had a limb come out of a tree and try to whip a knowledge knot on my noggin, but it missed. But it did get the saw, poked a hole in the cylinder cover, so I went ahead and added some holes. It seemed like it run better to me, getting a little bit more air, this air injection, same with the Husqvarna, so you're not getting a whole lot of extra other than what's getting stuffed in. There's a hole underneath in the carb box. It's not very big. It's about the size of the head on the bolt. That was a 5 millimeter bolt, by the way. So I think that the additional reliefs in the cylinder cover, allowing more air to get in, help this saw, so it's running a little bit better than it was this summer. Whereas I actually put in a request to do some hole drilling. We're going to replace the base gasket. You will wreck the base gasket if these things have any amount of time on them at all. It seems like there's some kind of a adhesive. This goes on the cases, and it doesn't take long to run them, and you're basically, this part's sticking to the cases, and so you ruin the base gasket. So I got a new one. In the meantime, I was running the saw with a base gasket that I actually had to make. So I'm going to do another little tweak to this saw, try to even it up a little bit with the 462, put a new base gasket in. We're going to run them again. Maybe what I'll do is I'll post the video of the saw off with these two, then we'll post this particular session, and then we'll saw them off again and see if there's any kind of a differential after we get done tweaking on the 572 a little bit. So I can't control anything with the carburation. That is just about where I like them personally. If I can control them, it's running maybe a little bit rich. If you're using it day in and day out, that's kind of the color I like to see. Maybe just a fuzz lighter than that, but not too much. So the M-tronics, we're going to take a look at what we get out of those real quick and see what the spark plug looks like since we had the 572 already taken apart. Easy access to the plug. And the 572 uses the old style plug. The 462 uses the smaller 10 mil plug. You can see it's quite a bit darker on the plug itself. You can see we're ready to change these plugs. So the last test was run with these two plugs installed. I haven't done anything except take the plugs out to these two. And they're looking at the gap and the top of the electrode. You can see there's well, maybe you can't, but there's a little bit of a wear pattern going on both of them on the electrode that comes up through the center. So we'll be replacing those. If we look in, you can see it's pretty dark. Can't really see in the muffler on the 572 because you can't take the casing off like you can in the 462. Another interesting note, so I wouldn't say that I'm super impressed with this quarter twist lock situation. Yeah, not too impressed with that whole situation right there. A much better operation going on with the 572. Pretty decent sized hole. We actually have a little bit of a taper built into the design of the air cleaner, which is nice. We'll look at the carb. We've looked at this before. Same old, although I did kind of tweak the carburetor. That's not actually completely all stock 572. It's got a little bit of a differential going there. If we take a look real quick at the piston, like I said, I didn't do much in the way of tearing it down. We can see we've got some pretty good burn characteristics, and we can see the full circle crank situation going on right there, and you can tell we got a lot of cleanup to do. So yeah, I guess if we just take a look at the piston itself, I'm thinking I've been blending my own mix oil for quite some time. We can see that we got a pretty good color going on, and for a saw that's super sloppy out of the box tolerance wise, we're not getting a lot of wear. We don't see really much evidence of ghosting. That's primarily a problem in the Stihl saws. There's a little bit of it coming in right here across the girth, but that's kind of more of a Stihl issue. We're going to get into that one someday here, one of these days, I guess. So that's kind of about the gist of what we had going on here. Like I said, we're going to do a couple minor tweaks on the 572, then we'll run them again, see what we end up with. So anyway, we had a little mini session here. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.